You need to understand that acne is actually one of your commensal bacteria which starts growing because the pH of your skin got altered.
So how do you explain aging when it comes to skin?
Say don't sleep with makeup because you're clogging the pores for that much duration of time. So you will lead to developing acne. So microbiota is the live bacteria which lives on your skin or in your gut. And it's actually forming, like literally responsible for 2 to 3 kgs of your body weight. That's how many organisms you have living on your body at any given time.
So when is there a requirement to take a DHT?
The fact that your hormone is causing the health. So in that sense, for someone who's suffering from severe androgenic issue, biotin is not going to solve your problem.
What can change the pH of our scalp besides drying our hair too much?
Apple cider vinegar is known to have a fungicidal effect.
Welcome to the Luke Coutinho Show, where we can learn to reimagine our lifestyle.
Dr. Sonali, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. This is episode 2.
The pleasure is all mine.
Number 1 was so amazing. We had so many people reaching out, talking about the amazing wisdom that you had shared. You had debunked so many myths and, taken a lot of confusion out of people. So thank you for coming back again. I know we couldn't finish the conversation last time, but thank you so much.
No, I'm glad that your audience found the information useful. I think that's what it's all about, sharing it there and letting people absorb what they can, So,
Doctor, we spoke last time about stress as well. One of the biggest stresses today are young girls, young boys, young men coming to us. We're so stressed out, Luke, my skin is aging. It's not supposed to be this way. My complexion's changing. I'm getting wrinkles. I'm getting all of these things. How do you explain aging when it comes to skin? And what can we do? What are some of the signs that we can recognize, in our skin with our own biofeedback that tells us, hey, we may be living the wrong way right now, wrong lifestyle, or maybe I need to take a professional opinion from a skin specialist, from a doctor, because these are my symptoms that are making me look older.
True.
So I would love for you to talk about aging in your dimension.
I think it's what you said, right? We are seeing a lot more of it in the last few decades. And when we talk about aging, I like to classify it as, let's say, something what would be called as cosmetic aging. So when a person comes to you, there are traditional signs of cosmetic aging, which would be graying of hair, sagging of skin, developing deep wrinkles, fine lines coming around it. And that's something that people notice first. But when you look at it at a cellular level, there is another aging which is happening in your cells, okay? And that is actually the biological aging, which is completely controlled with your genetics, and something which I am very passionate about is your epigenetics. So it's the environment which is controlling those genes to start aging faster. And that's why in today's world, when we talk about longevity, people keep saying, oh, but my grandmother didn't have this skin at this age. But when you go to see, longevity actually meant the length and the duration. But now people are using it synonymously with aging. And it's two different concepts, because aging is happening very cellularly and longevity is actually you being free of disease. So the concepts are completely different. So what I've noticed a lot now in people is that because we are exposed to such high levels of pollution in your environment, we expose our own bodies to so many toxins and chemicals, the phytoestrogens, which are just out there through materials that you are drinking bottles, plastic, let's say, for that, makeup that women use, a lot of other factors. This has accelerated aging. And then comes in your diet, which is a very, very important factor.
I just want to go back to one word where you spoke about makeup. One of the most common questions I get from young girls and women that, hey, Luke, I put makeup, I put a lot of makeup, I go to work and whatever. Is this going to make my skin age faster? Because when I look in the mirror with my makeup, I'm very different. When I remove my makeup, it seems like I don't have that glow after a couple of months. One lady uses the word luster. I'm losing that. Is it because of the makeup or is it because of my lifestyle?
I'll give you one very simple tool to understand. You have to understand that any makeup is usually going to have a base. Either it's a cream or a gel or a serum base. And the point of the base is reflection. So when I'm going to apply that on my skin, light will reflect in a manner to give you sheen. So your skin can never look the same how it's looking with or without makeup, because that's a camouflage technique. So let's get the basics right. Now coming to how it's affecting you, it's more scientific, but let me make it as simple. There's a microbiome. Okay, and that microbiome is the genetics of the microbes that live on your skin. Now when I'm constantly exposing it to makeup removers, other things which are being lathered on my skin, I am affecting that microbiotic makeup, right? Like I'm affecting that gene pool makeup, that not in makeup in the cosmetic sense, but the makeup of those genetics of those bacteria. And when that gets altered is what is setting your skin off for acne, pigmentation, aging, and various other factors.
Got it.
Now, this is not going to happen with a one-time usage or two-time usage, right? It's something that we have chosen over time. And at the same time, it's something that we all need. I cannot, like I use makeup as well. You can make conscious choices. You can make sure that you're removing your makeup on time. You know, look at your ingredients. But at the end of the day, it's physiologically what I told you. You're still affecting the microbiome of your skin. You are altering it in that sense. So the only thing that you can do as something anecdotal is you reconstitute it, right? So you eat good probiotics, you make your diet which is rich, and you help the microbiome rebuild. And that becomes very essential. So if you bear that in mind, I think makeup doesn't necessarily make you age, but the over usage of it with time will alter it.
Will alter it, yeah. So I think the thicker the layers and the longer you keep it on, if you don't remove it properly, then that can alter the skin.
So lathering of the skin is blocking your pores, right? You're not allowing your natural sebaceous activity to happen. Your skin glands are supposed to produce natural oil. And when that's not going to happen, you're going to clog it. And that's why they say don't sleep with makeup. Because you're clogging the pores for that much duration of time. So you will lead to developing acne.
One of your patients is on our program and you gave her this exact same advice to stop using or to minimize it. Because she was having a lot of acne and a dullness in her skin. And I want to tell you how remarkable 3 weeks later, everything's changed. And you didn't give her a whole list of stuff to take. You just told her cut this out because apparently you told her, I think her skin type and the humidity in Mumbai wasn't conducive. And we had her on probiotics. She was exercising anyway. She was a fit woman. So,
but it's what you said. See, you said probiotics. You need to understand that acne is actually one of your commensal bacteria which starts growing because the pH of your skin got altered. Now, when I am lathering my skin, I'm changing the pH of the skin. I'm clogging my pores. At the same time, I'm affecting the microbiome over time. And these things no one really delves into because it is at some level very scientific. But if you go to think, it's the absolute basics that exist. So the whole world is talking about microbiome. But you know, it's the simple difference. People don't understand that there is a difference in the microbiota. There is a difference in the microbiome and it's what it's doing to your skin. So you're altering it over time. Genetic changes are not just going to happen over 1 or 2 months. It's something we've chosen to do over years.
Okay. No, thanks for explaining that. I wanted to jump straight into hair, thinning of the hair. Okay, what is the major reason that you see today in people who are thinning, whether it's men, whether it's women, young girls, you know, the thinning of the hair, the breaking of hair, you know, what's going on in the human body for this to happen? And what would you suggest as ways to kind of identify and overcome this?
I think I personally have seen, I think a sudden increase in the number of patients with hair fall. And it's what you said, right? Some is hair breakage and some is hair fall happening from the root. But the patient is coming to you with the simple complaint of hair fall. It's very important to understand that, you know, we are all born with a fixed number of hair follicles, right? But your hair follicles have this regeneration capacity. They are blessed with these stem cells. So what it really comes down to is encouraging those hair stem cells to produce new hair. Okay. But when you look at a person, somebody might have long hair, somebody might have very short hair. So you need to understand that that is controlled by your growth phase of your hair, right? And the growth phase of your scalp hair is very different from the rest of your body. That's why for men, even if you typically don't shave or wax, your hair will never grow till the ground. But in some people, when you don't cut your hair, they do grow to certain lengths. So now the whole game just comes down to encouraging hair growth in that growth phase. And for that, you need to give targeted action. So there are a lot of things out in the market which people are promoting for hair growth. But if you really go to see what actually works, in my opinion, is helping with protein, because your hair is protein. So you help to build that protein so that the hair is not brittle. Secondly, you can use techniques which increase the blood flow. So that is why traditionally these oil massages came with the whole concept, because that was increasing the blood flow. That does help the stem cells. And lastly, in some cases when it is a hormone dependent hair loss, then you need to target that, right? Now everything else that comes with it in terms of your mineral supplementation, whether it's a low thyroid, whether it's a low iron, these become the contributory factors, but the primary basis lies in these three.
Got it. And in the case of alopecia, which is autoimmune, how would your protocol change for that? Or would it be the same fundamentals?
No. So in alopecia, because it is, as you said, it's autoimmune, I usually like to understand the root cause with the patient. And you'll be surprised, Luke, that when you do their blood work, many of them are actually suffering from autoimmune thyroid, right?
Hashimoto's,
but unfortunately, it's not clinically present always. So your TSH might be sitting at its optimum level, and that's why you're repeatedly being told that you don't need anything. But your thyroid antibodies could actually be really peaking. And that comes into a play with your hair loss, because it is autoimmunity happening. So your body is still detecting inflammation, and that's affecting your follicles. So I feel when you holistically treat it, and in many cases, it's even a low vitamin D. So I feel like when you support the thyroid gland, whether it's with selenium or the right food choices or giving the patients what they need, even iodine in some cases, I have seen patients show much better hair growth.
Yeah, it's amazing that you mentioned that, because in our panel of tests for anyone who joins our program, there is an ATG and an anti-TPO.
Yeah.
Because it just signifies that there's an autoimmune, condition in the body. And if you don't address it now, tomorrow it could be an arthritis, it could be any other autoimmune condition.
It's so lovely that you are doing that, because even though, of course, I practice traditional allopathic medicine, but I've had so many patients come back to me and say this to me, that doc, they said that these are antibodies and we just have to live with them. They're never really going to change,
those patients too.
Right? And it's so tough as a dermatologist to explain why I need that antibody titer to come down, because in their opinion, they're thinking she needs to give me a serum and she needs to give me a roller and my hair needs to get fixed. There's no correlation with this. But when you look at it holistically, these things become prime importance. Till I fix that gland functioning, I can't reach anywhere else.
Yeah. No, I love what you spoke about, because, so many people out there have the TSH coming in. It's absolutely perfect.
Yes.
But they're missing the antibodies. There are these signs of autoimmune, and unless you get the antibodies checked, you can't.
And I'll tell you one thing which I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, is most people, when they go, the doctor just tells them, just avoid soy.
Yeah.
For people who have high autoantibodies, but their TSH is okay, right? But research has shown that soy actually does not impacting your thyroid gland directly. It's affecting the absorption of the thyroxine medicine which is given for the thyroid.
And that is affecting.
And that is affecting it. So you typically don't actually have to go off soy. In general, yes, you have to be very or genetically modified foods.
Yes.
But that reasoning is completely different from the concept when you're looking at thyroid gland for its role in skin or hair. And these myths, if they were explained to the patient, or I feel like if consumers were more aware, it would make life a lot easier, because then you don't treat disease as a disease. You treat disease as a lifestyle modification. And then it's easier to live with, right?
Beautifully put. Talking about soy, we're about to put it out there on social media, because we work very closely with Dr. Lee Williams' work.
Right.
And he's a Harvard...
yes, I've heard of him.
Angiogenesis, the king of angiogenesis, moved massively into nutrition. And his research on soy challenges all the fears that we grew up with. Of course, if you're eating GMO soy, no one should eat it. Forget about anyone.
Exactly.
But if it isn't genistein in soy, we are actually now putting our patients on it, whether they're ER positive breast cancers, prostate. Before we were just, because the information was incomplete.
True.
But we're learning how it can. And of course, someone on a thyroid medication, if you're separating the time of soy and that, there's absolutely no problem. But it's amazing.
And that's what I said, right? Like when you know about the medication, so you change the timing.
There
are tools to fix that. And when we, it's funny, we say, let's avoid soy, let's not eat edamame, but you're having cornflakes for breakfast. It's filled with corn syrup. You'll be shocked, Luke, that I have 2 small babies, and when I was choosing a formula, do you know how many formulas, like formula mixes for children, are enriched with corn syrup?
That's crazy.
And it's all GMO. So literally I had to look for a formula which stated non-GMO to make sure that I was not exposing my child's gut to it.
Right.
So this is how much stuff is out there. And why it's important is, being a dermatologist, in your growth phases, that's when your aging genes are also very heightened. So if you make sure that you give your children that optimum food requirement and the supplement requirement in their growth spurt phase, you're actually setting up for a better aging cycle for them.
Yeah. No, that's brilliantly put. You're talking about growth. I want to talk about growth hormones, because that's become something huge as well.
Yes.
The young guys in the gym pumping themselves. I understand certain sports allow certain cycles of GH, and a lot of our cricket players do it for cycles. But the average person just taking GH under the guidance of a trainer, we're actually seeing a lot of side effects happening and all of these things. I can understand controlled environment, calculated, you're cycling it, 14 days, 21, brilliantly done. But today it's available everywhere and people are doing this. What's your take on this? Because before we started the podcast, you were sharing some really interesting research about how GH can actually affect our aging negatively. I'd love you to talk about
that. I'm so happy to discuss this with you because growth hormone, as the name would suggest, is needed for growth, right? But it's become very popular as something that people are taking for vitality, right? So you'll see, as you said, you see a lot of people who are using it for bulking, but you're also seeing people using it for as an anti-aging tool. And you know, traditionally this term anti-aging, it puts me off in that sense because you cannot reverse what is meant to happen. You can slow it and do it gracefully, right? So when you're taking growth hormone, which is not done in a cyclic or under the moderation of a person who's trained to do it, you're actually putting your body to more harm because it has shown to cause aging when taken long term and not controlled. And there are certain genes which get set off, right? So you have a gene which is like your SERT gene, which is your protection. Now growth hormone can actually interfere with that. So in the long term, when you look at it, it has more side effects than benefits. And the same thing with leucine. Leucine is just being given to people randomly for bulking. So for that extra 5% body mass, do you really want to affect your longevity in the true sense? Because that is what is actually affecting your longevity. And I see so many patients, they come to me, they're on whey protein combinations with leucine, fortified with leucine, then they're taking add-on growth hormone and not being done under the supervision. They are just doing it for that little extra percent of bulking. And it's tough to explain, but even short-term, acutely, in many of these cases, because it harms their androgens, you can see them with severe acne breakouts,
I see that.
excessive hair loss, onset of insulin resistance, so darkening of the neck. So, you know, in that sense, medicine is very correlated when it comes to dermatology because it just shows up on your skin.
I'm a huge fan of, you know, what you talk about when it comes to growth hormones, because I mean, when you come down to the basics of the biology of cancer, it involves growth hormones again, because any cancer cell that's going to grow into a tumor involves a growth hormone, and which is why it is so important not to overdo it on proteins. It's so important not to overdo it on supplements, especially when a patient is metabolically unfit. And like you had mentioned about the IGF-1 factor as well, which plays a huge role in the prostate and everything. Positively, negatively when it's either too low or too high as well.
And IGF-1 is needed for good hair growth. And growth hormone actually acts on it negatively when in the wrong amounts. So I'm not saying growth hormone is not good for you, right? But you know this better than me, right? Sleep is the most essential factor. And there's a very interesting study which showed that if you just circulate your sleeping time on a regular basis, there will be release of growth hormone which starts 2 hours after going into deep sleep.
That's true.
So if you start working on making sure that you're going into your deep sleep patterns and doing it in a regular circadian manner, you can actually have your body regulate the growth hormone that it needs for anti-aging naturally, rather than pumping it synthetically, because that is actually very, very risky and harmful because it's triggering your stem cells. That's why it's growth hormone, right? But if you trigger the wrong progenitor cell, you're calling for big trouble.
Absolutely. I love what you said about sleep, because I mean, in our deep sleep, we want to only boost our HGH, which is our growth hormone, but our collagen, like we spoke about, structural collagen in the skin. And I think, I mean, everyone watching this knows on a day that you're sleep deprived, how different your skin looks from a night that you've had like absolute deep sleep. I really love as a medical professional that you speak about the circadian rhythm and all of these things. You're also big on inflammation, and I wanna ask you, do you see a lot of people today with just inflammation in their bodies based on their biofeedback of skin and hair? And what can we do to reduce inflammation? I mean, of course, there are anti-inflammatory foods. We should exercise, not overtrain. But how do you help your patients with understanding inflammation and its role in skin and hair health?
I think it's what you said, you know, especially with skin, almost every skin disease has an inflammatory mediator, which is being leaked into the skin. Whether you talk about psoriasis, you talk about atopic dermatitis, acne, hair loss, they all have an inflammatory component. And you know what I've grown to realize is that environmental factors, including stress, becomes a very important issue. Now, when you talk about stress, it's not necessarily the physical stress, right? There's a certain amount of emotional stress you're exposing your body to, and there's a certain amount of stress which is coming through because of your environment. That could be your lifestyle choices as well. So at any given point, I believe in today's world, we're all suffering from some amount of inflammation, which is where your dietary support and your supplements become very important.
Yeah.
And I always tell my patients that, even like an itch scratch cycle which develops later into a rash or an eczema could be that early marker showing you that your body needs support. So consuming antioxidants cyclically, I don't say that have them regularly.
Correct. Yeah.
Consuming omega-3, I think is very important. And, changing oils in which you cook. A lot of seed oils are pro-inflammation.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
shifting, like making that basic shift to cooking in nut oils.
Yeah.
A lot of people just say, canola oil is healthy,
Yeah.
right? Canola is GMO.
It's
This is what I'm
GMO
saying.
and highly
You need
refined.
to be aware of what you're consuming and putting into your body. Everyone says, oh, doctor, I eat so healthy. And when you ask them, what are you eating? I'm eating zucchini. Even zucchini can be GMO. You know what I'm saying? So you need to have that awareness, because for inflammation, you consciously, I think you have 3 pillars. You have your diet, you have your mind, and you have your body. So you need to exercise, you need to do mind calming activities, and you need to eat healthy.
Yes. And sleep, which you had
And
spoken
of course,
about earlier.
sleep for me is
The top,
something,
right?
it
Me
goes
too.
without saying.
Me too, it's the top.
Because I think just for functionality, forget the growth hormone, forget everything else, all the benefit it comes with, that's the only time you give your body and your cells to regenerate.
Absolutely.
So,
no, absolutely.
yeah.
So, doctor, what are some of your favorite supplements that you would use in a world like today? Like, I'm not going to shy away. There are good supplements, there are bad supplements.
Yes.
There are synthetic, there are better made, wrong fillers, right fillers and stuff like that. So, what are some of the supplements you see that the population needs today to support environmental breakdowns, pollution, food chain issues? Yeah, what would you use basically?
Luke, it's very interesting because I'm a big supplemental supporter, but at the same time, I always tell my patients that be aware of what you're putting in,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So I usually, if you have to talk in the broader sense, when I look at someone who's in the second decade of life, right, typically 20s to 30s, you see a lot of cases coming to you with a lot of insulin resistance. That's a very peak time I'm saying it. So I do choose a lot of inositol in up to 900, milligram dosages, and the right combination. It should be the perfect blend of myo and inositol, right? Like that 40:1 ratio to give you. Berberine is something that has worked very well. It's a root extract, but works very well for insulin resistance. And in younger generations, because of so many diets, I prefer to see their levels where they sit at with even vitamin D and B12.
Yeah, true.
And we've seen increasing amounts of people coming in with these deficiencies. But one thing which I want to highlight is a lot of the young kids come with high prolactin. And that's because of the poor lifestyle choices,
and
right?
stress,
They're sleeping
right?
late.
Even stress.
Even just the sleep, because prolactin is specifically released an hour after waking up when sunlight hits your eye, right? And it's a very essential hormone for female health and for your skin. So these young girls come in with all blocked pores and they've done all the tests and they say, Doc, I don't have PCOD, I don't have PCOS, why is my skin? And you test that one thing and prolactin is high. And I'm not saying corrected medication, but even vitamin B6 supplementation has shown amazing roles to bring down
prolactin
level. So that's what I like to look at in the second decade. Of course, there are variations. Some people might need this kind of support even later in life. In the third decade, I feel like your aging starts showing up. Resveratrol, omega-3, zinc. I feel these 3 supplements become very essential in my list. And now curcumin, because 30s to 40s is when you're typically going through that stress of household, your career, and there's a lot more stress activators in your body. So I feel as antioxidants, curcumin works brilliantly. And in your later age, I would say for longevity, in that sense of your organs and to be disease free, NAD works very well. It's a really good supplement to look at, and quercetin.
And I think most individuals after the age of 35 will start to naturally deplete NAD.
True.
So, I mean, if you can put the precursors in, fantastic. Otherwise,
which is why I said age-wise. See, this is what I'm saying. Just because you're 20 and you feel you're aging, you can't start taking NAD.
True.
This is the whole point of understanding what your body needs it and when it needs it. Because, now with social media, this is the new thing with anti-aging. Let's start drinking red wine. Because resveratrol is found in red wine.
You can get it in other sources too.
Yes, you can get it in other sources. Grapes, peanuts, it's what we were discussing earlier, right? But I think that awareness is important. You need to know what your body needs and at what is the right age to consume it.
Correct. No, that's fantastic. I love that you speak about supplements that way, because there's always the pros, cons and everything, but it's the right way you take it and the right quantity as well. So, doctor, I want to go back to how beautifully you explained the skin microbiome. And if I had to ask you, what should we all do to, what are some of the changes we can do to look after or let this microbiome flourish.
Yeah.
Because everyone knows now, I mean, not everyone knows, but we keep talking about the gut microbiome. Do this, do that, keep gaps between your meals, prebiotic, probiotic. Give us some routines and tips for our skin microbiome.
I think, the skin microbiome is a topic for like one whole session in itself, because it's so massive to discuss. But just to give you the gist of it, I think, the gut-brain-skin axis, it's all becoming very popular.
Yeah.
You're hearing people talk about it. There's a lot of information coming out. The basis of that gut-brain-skin axis is the microbiome. So microbiota is the live bacteria which lives on your skin or in your gut. And it's actually forming, like literally responsible for 2 to 3 kgs of your body weight. That's how many organisms you have living on your body at any given time. And the genetic makeup of these microbes is what your microbiome stands for, right? What is very, very interesting is that when you are in your gestational period, right, like as a fetus growing, you start developing your microbiome. But your first exposure is what starts that climatization, which is why a lot of people believe that vaginal birth was better for the child's skin over a C-section. But now research has shown that in the vaginal birth, there might be certain bacteria which colonize the skin. And in the C-section, you might have more colonies of the mother's microbiome, right? And when we look at the gut microbiome, that's responsible in the similar manner for 70% of your immunity. So it's actually the first place where your food is getting primed, right? And when we talk about gut, I think a lot of people think we're talking about the stomach. But what we're actually looking at is your entire digestive tract.
Correct.
So the microbiome starts right from the mouth, going up all the way to the lining. So everything you eat is affecting your microbiome, which is where the probiotic and the prebiotic comes into the role. And I think orally we can do it. With skin, it gets tricky because, you can't really have an assurity that you're putting a live bacteria on your skin.
Unless you're playing with soil,
Yes.
you're doing your gardening, you're in the mud.
That gets you
you're
to
in
that
all of
point.
that.
That's why spending time in nature
yeah.
meant so much. And maybe that's why we saw lesser occurrences of skin disease in the kids earlier, because they just had so much time in the open. That's one. Second was community living. So they had a lot of person-to-person contact, which also builds your microbiome. You would allow your neighbors to pick up your child. You'd allow them to hug them. Now we don't. Our kids are wrapped up in swaddles from the day they are born, right?
True.
And we're scared. Of course, we've lived through a pandemic, rightly so. But that has all affected our microbiome over time. And it's been gradual, but that's what we have done. And that's why, Luke, you'll be shocked. I think I must be seeing, in my practice, if I see 10 children in a day, there must be 4 who come with atopic dermatitis.
Wow.
And the sad thing is, people like to believe that that's something they'll have to live with, which is where it gets difficult to explain to them how the role of environment and diet can play a role. Because telling a mother with a child of atopic dermatitis that make your kid go off gluten or make your kid go off dairy can be very challenging.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant point. I like that you bring the holistic angle into everything that you do. I want to talk about male balding now. By the way, Istanbul apparently has become a destination for hair transplant, hair, whatever. Someone sent me a picture at the airport of people with these bandages. I was like, what happened to them?
They are the maximum number of people balding.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I wanted to understand more about this. Yeah, I know stress is a big player. Some people have alopecia, but you can see those little clumps. It's a very different pattern. What about male balding? Because a lot of people like to blame it on their genetics. While I can believe it's true, but no, a lot of their lifestyle should change. Can you tell me about the cases that you see?
It's very interesting that you said it's genetics, because the only thing that's genetically controlled is the pattern. The pattern in which you might bald, right? So your receptors, how they are placed, is what is decided genetically, and that also more so on your mother. Or your maternal gene.
Oh, interesting.
But we all blame, we say, oh, your father is bald, you're going to be bald. But it's actually not true. And it's not true that because they are bald, you'll be bald. It's just the pattern in which they balded could be very similar to yours. Suppose you have a receding hairline or you lost hair from behind. That's the only thing that is genetically controlled. Now, what's really happening in male patterned baldness or female patterned baldness, it's called androgenic alopecia. So what that stands for is that it's androgenic, which means it's totally dependent on the male hormone.
Male hormones,
okay?
Yeah.
And when I'm saying male hormone, I'm not saying cut out the testosterone in your body, because it's actually a form of testo which gets activated, which is your DHT, which is causing the hair follicle to start in its recession mode, or it's affecting the stem cells from giving you new hair growth. And this is where all your treatment plans come in. Right? So you have two ways of looking at it, which is you prevent that conversion of that testo to DHT. And that's why a lot of people take these drugs, which are out there in the market. And I'm not saying drugs like finasteride or dutasteride cannot work, but there are other ways in terms of something like a curcumin, when given in the right dosage, can actually inhibit the conversion.
Wow, that's
So
interesting.
there are ways to look at other choices. Fenugreek has shown a role. Caffeine has shown a role when applied topically to also help with vasodilation and prevent that conversion, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that you should give it a holistic look. In certain cases, when it can't be helped, I agree that you have to give the patient one of these drugs.
Yeah.
But something which is very commonly prescribed, like a minoxidil, is only pushing the hair into the growth phase, right? And it's working primarily by vasodilation. It was a drug which was given for blood pressure. So that is how technically it works.
Okay.
So I feel that before putting the patient on that, we can try other techniques which can increase the blood flow to the scalp before we choose a drug to correct the hair loss.
Wow. So what about, a lot of people are now buying these DHT supplements and taking it. Can you tell us the pros and cons of it? Because I feel you're interfering with a very delicate balance in the body, and it has to be prescribed.
Yes.
But a lot of people are taking OTC, DHT.
So it's what I said, right? Now people have understood that DHT is the hormone causing the hair loss.
Right.
So when you say DHT supplements, they think anything is working for you.
Yeah.
A very simple example would be, most of these supplements might contain a mix of palmetto, saw palmetto, or biotin.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to understand now biotin is the protein forming the hair, right? And that will typically only impact the density of how thick your hair is, right? It's not actually technically changing the fact that your hormone is causing the hair loss. So in that sense, for someone who's suffering from severe androgenic issue, biotin is not going to solve your problem. But for someone who has brittle hair, who's over-treated chemical hair and they are breaking their hair from the middle, right? That's
biotin
the cause
can
of
help.
Then biotin will help. So just prescribing biotin over the counter is not going to solve your problem. Similarly, saw palmetto has shown a role, but in a very, very decreased amount, it has shown that benefit, and never alone. All studies have shown when given in combination. So you have to know with what combination you're taking it. So these supplements which are out there in the market, I can't refute it by saying that they don't work. I just feel like you have to make a very sensible choice for what is the cause of your hair loss.
Okay.
Whether it's the protein which is causing the breakage, whether your cells need more vasodilation to encourage it, or whether it's the combination of everything that will work for you.
So when is there a requirement to take a DHT?
See,
you're either looking at blocking.
Yeah. So it's majorly we're looking at blocking.
Blocking DHT.
And that's when you're looking at distributing your, like stopping the conversion. So we give 5-alpha reductase, which is your enzyme. We try to block it, right? So the only way for me is to measure it in your blood work. If your DHT comes at a level which I feel is going to be harmful, we have to give it to you. But you have to understand, when I'm blocking it at one place, initially it was used for the prostate gland. Because that's where it was seen, right? And that's when we understood you can stop the effect of that particular male hormone on the receptors, and similarly it will act on your scalp as well. So you have to make a very calculated choice. I feel like nowadays, because male pattern baldness has become so common, people are just willing to use anything. And in India, you don't always need a prescription to buy a drug. So you get on these drugs without knowing what their long-term side effects are, right? And then when the side effects set in is when the problem sets in.
Yeah. You know, speaking about this, there are these companies now that have come up with these hair kits, and they're very reasonably priced. Buy this hair kit, have one call with a coach, and you know, they're selling like hotcakes. I have nothing against these brands, but what I don't understand is you're taking a bio-individual, unique person who may have a hair fall because of, like you said, a thyroid issue, a Hashimoto's, and you're just giving everyone the same thing based on a picture of your hair. Like, I mean, how do we ask people or educate people that, you know, because I guess everyone's looking for a quick fix at the end of the day, that there is a bio-individual approach to your skin and your hair.
I think this is where you need to understand that AI is not your doctor.
Yeah.
Right? So the technology is there. You can photograph it, but it's not like what a clinician would see and pluck your hair and see whether the hair fall is from the root or from the middle of your hair, right? So that's the first important thing. You need to be educated about that. But having said that, cyclic therapy, in terms of your nutrition, with your nutritional supplements will work. But if it has not been evaluated for you, suppose I am to start you on these cyclic therapies, typically they will have 2 tablets a day. And those tablets will also comprise of iron supplementation, selenium for your thyroid. It could have some amounts of these berry extracts, right, which will show hair growth. Now, when you take it, you might not be somebody who's metabolizing it well. And as I've said earlier in our podcast, a lot of people can get away with drinking caffeine and a lot of people can't. So it's as simple as a drink of coffee, right? So imagine when you're just consuming these supplements, if your body didn't need them. And typically out of this, the one I would point out is iron. Because if iron is overcompensated, it can have detrimental effects on your health.
It's toxic, right?
It's toxic.
Yeah.
And because these drugs are over the counter and not customized to each individual, every time you will have a seasonal hair loss, you might just go back on the box. And that's not how it's supposed to be. These medications are given to you after you show a certain amount of hair loss. It's not that I brushed my hair and I had 30 hair. That's not hair loss.
Got it. Yeah.
At any given time, only 10% of your hair are growing. Some of them are in the resting phase and some of them are in the falling phase, right? So your falling stage can last from 3 to 6 months. So you will shed your hair in that duration. The question comes when my hair is not going into the growth phase. That is where I have to start working.
Right.
And that only a dermatologist or a trained trichologist can identify for you.
Doctor, are you seeing problems with hair loss and change in skin with women who are hitting perimenopause and menopause? Because of the change of estrogen in their body, you're seeing that, right? There is a correlation.
Of course. It's totally hormonally controlled.
Right?
So, you know what happens is, we are all born with the male hormone. All of us, right? Even women. You'll be surprised that most women, testosterone comes higher than their estrogen. Because as they're declining in their menopause, the estrogen is beginning to drop down.
Yeah.
And that male hormone will start showing. So sometimes women will come to you saying, Doc, I just suddenly developed abnormal hair in their 50s, right? And it might be a grey hair, but it's an abnormal hair growth. It's because of the same receptor stimulation, right? It's your male hormone. That's why men have a stubble.
Yeah.
So when that hormone acts here, it causes hair growth. But in your front area of the scalp, it's acting negatively. So it's causing hair loss. So women also notice hair thinning. Other than that, along with the decline in estrogen, you have to understand that there is a decline which is also happening in your cells. So you are going through cellular aging. So if we don't support it with diet and workout, especially muscle training, you are breaking down collagen at a much faster rate. So that has to be supported, right? And it has to be supported with muscle buildup at the same time with the food required for that muscle buildup. So that is where that whole aging scenario comes in.
Doctor, I wanted to speak to you about the difference between dandruff and flaky skin. So sometimes people say, hey, Luke, I have dandruff. And my dermatologist gave me XYZ. Some people come and say, I don't think I have dandruff because it's just flaky skin. It's not itching me, but it falls down. I know there's a difference. Can you explain this difference, why it happens, and what can we start looking at?
I think sometimes it might get generalized into one category. But what's very important is that dandruff is a fungal infection. And when I'm looking at flaky skin, I'm likely to identify a dermatitis, which means there's inflammation of the skin involved. Now with a fungal infection, my treatment line becomes totally separate, right? We're going to look at antifungals. We're going to make sure that what is affecting that growth of fungus and halt it there. But when we're looking at flaky skin, it could be the early onset of seborrheic dermatitis. It could be very early psoriasis, which could be limited to the scalp. So it could be just scalp psoriasis, or it could be just a patch of eczema, which has gotten triggered because of wrong chemicals, excessive usage of drying, or any product which you might have applied on the skin which caused those allergies. But it becomes very important to understand that when there is flakiness, there could be a buildup of those flakes. And when that patient starts that itch-scratch cycle, it could lead to bleeding and then superimposed bacterial infections. So you should have it identified and nip it in the bud.
Got it. And so you spoke about over drying as well and the change of pH. What can change the pH of our scalp besides drying our hair too much?
So your scalp has a pH like your skin. It's actually the skin continuing, right? So in that sense, your scalp is also producing sebum, which is produced by your hair glands, like your sebaceous glands, and that's giving that layer of lipid. Now, when we overuse our chemicals, use excessively harsh shampoos, that's why this whole new trend came of sulfate-free shampoos, phthalate-free shampoos. That's where the studies came out from, because it was seen that when there was a buildup of these things on your scalp, if it was not thoroughly cleansed, that would cause the irritation of the scalp and alter the pH. Washing your hair with very high hot water, that affects the pH. Wearing a shower cap every day has also shown to affect the pH of your scalp while bathing, because it actually leads to that steam buildup within.
Interesting.
Right? And we all do it. Like everyone likes showers, and you tend to use a shower cap so often, but you'll realize that over time it can actually make your hair brittle.
Okay. All right. So what about hair dryers? When you want to dry your hair quickly and stuff, is that excessive heat also changing the pH?
Now, luckily, there are temperature controlled dryers which with very good brands, but also blast drying your hair and using cold air over hot air would be a better choice.
Got it.
But having said that, in general, your hair has a hydral factor. So the drying part, when the wet hair has to go into the drying phase, that is a time of weakness for your hair, which is why there are separate brushes which are being promoted now for wet hair combing. Because when you comb your hair when they are wet, they are in their most brittle phase. that's the time the cuticle is open. So it's losing maximum water out.
Wow.
And that's the concept of this whole bubble hair. So you'll see if you allow your hair to air dry, sometimes it has that whole static look.
Okay.
It's because those cuticles remained open and didn't shut because it absorbed water and it formed those bubbles. So in terms of drying, I would recommend towel drying naturally. And now there are these new concepts of those turbans which you tie on your hair because of that same reason, that the least friction you give your hair when they are wet, the better it is, because that's the time when the breakage will be the highest.
So now air dry, or you can use a cold dryer, which is not a hot blow dryer.
And also just on the lengths of the hair and at a distance. So not too much of the scalp.
And not too much of the
So
scalp.
you're not causing excessively over drying. It's like how when water has to dry off your skin, when allowed to dry naturally, it'll move at a certain pace. That's why.
So basically women can, or guys who have long hair, they could put the turban to cover their scalp and then use a dryer to kind of a cold dryer.
So it helps to the settle. And also one more thing which can always help is pre-oiling. So pre-oiling is literally something like what you would do is conditioning. So if you typically see in a salon when hair masks are applied, they are applied before the wash. And the reason is because the conditioner actually seals that cuticle. So an oil would do the same job for you. It would seal the cuticle of your hair and prevent that water loss from your hair shaft into the environment. So preventing that excessive loss, because your hair, you need a hygrophobic structure. So oil is that hygrophobic which will prevent the water loss from your hair into the environment. And similarly, it works on the skin. But what I do say is, don't oil your hair overnight. Just a 20 minutes or 30 minutes before your head bath helps, because when you leave it overnight, you are also affecting again the pH of the scalp. And typically if someone has dandruff, you could actually be worsening it by providing such a moist environment.
Got it. So you're advising, if we're coming to the topic of oiling, which I will come to, but before that, so what's the best routine for all of us, like just the general audience, to look after our hair? Do I put a shampoo first, conditioner? Do I need a conditioner, man? Like, what are the roles for this?
So honestly, I feel sometimes, depending on your hair strength and your hair density, conditioners can be weighing down sometimes, right? So I prefer the pre-oiling because I feel like that is good enough conditioning for your hair. And after hair wash, maybe using a serum, which is light based, to just seal the cuticle and then drying your hair. At the same time, avoiding, as I said, hot water showers becomes very, very important. And a lot of people believe that, I can't wash my hair every day because they feel that I'm having that much breakage. But what I'd like to clarify here is that if your scalp is dirty and you're washing only twice a week and you're allowing that oil build up, you're actually causing more damage. So you rather wash your hair every day because that doesn't increase your hair loss. It will actually make your scalp healthier and your hair healthier over time. So that is something very, very important. And one simple trick which is difficult to do, but if you go to see rice water, the traditional rice kanji is so rich in ceramides,
and
probiotics. But for the hair specifically, it works like a sealant. So if once a week, maybe you can do the last rinse with the rice kanji, it will work like a rice ceramide rich pack for you.
Wow, that's a beautiful tip. What if I want to wash, not I, but we want to wash our hair every day? Do we need to use a shampoo every day?
No.
It's interesting because I have a hippie friend and he's now 82 years old, came to Goa at the time of the hippie. He's got dreadlocks, all of that. He's never used a shampoo. Never used a conditioner. Of course, he lives by the sea, eats like natural stuff, the hippie life, but he's only used water. Only water. So is it really possible to, out of all the days we use shampoo, can I just have a head rinse with water?
So I feel like because we live in so much pollution, a head rinse is compulsory, right? Every single day. But on the days that you do work out or you do have excessive sweating, or suppose you've had a change of environment, like you're traveling from one place to the other, you're exposed to, let's say, a higher AI index than your skin is normally used to, then shampooing and cleansing becomes very important because the built up, like it happens on your skin, is also happening on your hair. And sweat, because of the density, can worsen it. So in that case, you are leading to clogging. So ideally for any person living in a city like Mumbai, I would say you need to use a shampoo twice. But for someone like you said, who lives in a natural environment, even if they were rinsing with water, it would be different for them, right? But I think in general for someone like us in Mumbai or Delhi, using a shampoo, even for men, becomes a mandate at least twice a week to make sure that the scalp is cleansed.
So, doctor, when I get a lot of patients, some of them are from very traditional environments and they come to us with normal issues, but they have this thick, beautiful, natural hair. And I'm always looking like, I ask them, what's your routine for your hair? a lot of them have been speaking about using rock salt. You know, they shampoo their hair, they do like a little scrub, very light scrub with like salt or rock salt. I think that's what they said. They stand in the shower for about 10 or 15 minutes and then they rinse it and stuff.
Yeah.
Is it changing your pH? Because I know people do sea baths for so many, you know, for their skin, for their hair.
Yeah.
But I've also read reports that it could be quite contradictory. But I just wanted to understand your take on this.
No.
You know?
So I wouldn't totally rule it off,
Yeah.
if you ask me, in my opinion, for two reasons. One, that sometimes your scalp needs that exfoliation.
Yeah.
So the salt is actually
an
working as an
exfoliator.
exfoliation. So it's encouraging new cell
Yeah.
growth on your scalp because it's an exfoliant.
Yeah.
Secondly, salt in itself is what is
Mineral
used for.
rich.
It's a mineral.
Yeah.
It's used for electrolytes, right?
Yeah.
So it causes an osmotic gradient, which can actually increase the flow of minerals and blood flow to your hair follicle, and in that sense, actually help your hair growth.
Yeah.
Now, where I am not confident is how soon it acts and whether the people who are using it were actually blessed with good anagen cycles. That means they have a good phase of hair growth and they happen to use this product, and that's where the hair looks really, really healthy and radiant. But I can't totally rule it out because these two factors will always play a role, that it's an essential mineral which will help. And anything that increases blood flow to the scalp, whether it's happening because of the gradient with osmosis, will influence your stem cell production. So in that sense, yes.
Yeah.
So maybe not every day, but doing it twice a week could be beneficial.
Yeah.
And I think that is where it comes to even what you talk a lot about, charged water and hydration.
Yeah.
So consuming water in the right way becomes important. So in that sense, when the water is hitting your scalp, you're also changing the pH because the salt is applied on your scalp.
Oh, that's amazing. Doctor, I also wanted you to break whether it's a myth or a fact. A lot of people with dandruff, a lot of people with that flaky skin have said that, hey, we mixed apple cider vinegar with water, scrubbed our hair, washed it off, and it's disappeared for the next 5 to 10 days. I know apple cider can have a change in pH. Beneficial, not beneficial, or suits different people?
For me, apple cider vinegar is very beneficial. I say drink it,
yeah.
apply it, it's always good because
Yeah.
of the reason. Two, in the case of dandruff, not only the pH, apple cider vinegar is known to have a fungicidal effect. So if you read up papers, vinegar in its property chemically has fungicidal effect.
For toe fungus on the
Exactly,
toe,
you
we
do
make
apple
them
cider
soak.
vinegar soak.
Yeah.
So it has a fungicidal action, and
Got
that's how it's working on the dandruff because it's a fungus.
Got it.
And other traditionally used ketoconazole shampoos also really help, and you'll be surprised. There are interesting studies which show that people who are having hair loss sometimes is correlated with dandruff. So the underlying factor could be the dandruff. So when you start with the regular application of those solutions, some of them do show an improvement in their hair loss.
Brilliant, brilliant. You spoke about water. So let's talk about our water quality today.
Yes.
You know, I would love for you, because you've spoken about this many times, as hydration is not about just getting your 2 liters, 3 liters or 4 liters of water. I would love for you to talk about that.
I think I find what you share on this also very insightful about the whole idea of having charged water. So I see a lot of patients and they have xerotic skin or dry skin, and they'll always say this to me, Doc, I'm having so much water, where is the water going, right? And your body is typically 70% water. But the question comes that the water that you're having is also supposed to give you the minerals, right? And the water that's coming to our tables now, because of the purification that they go through, they have been depleted of most of those minerals. So one thing which I like to do or advise my patients is just to add that 1 pinch of rock salt in a liter of water and have it exposed to sunlight, for only reason that there is a temperature at which salt will dissolve better into the water, and that becomes charged.
It's charged, yeah.
And when you consume it, you will actually see that the taste is very similar to what you would typically have as Himalayan waters in the hills. So when you're traveling to your any of your hill stations, you have to say this, right? The water always tastes different.
Absolutely.
So what is the difference? The difference is the minerals.
The minerals,
and that is why most people say, oh, look, in the Northeast, the people have such better skin. So of course it's their diet, but it's a lot to do with their water as well.
Yes.
It's a lot to do
So we
with
can
their
do charged water with a Celtic sea salt, or we can use a rock salt. And
and it's very simple to do at home. I'm not saying go buy one of those Casgin devices.
Yeah, exactly.
But it can be done simply. It's just a mindset and a lifestyle change that you have to make. Like how you say, don't drink out of plastic water, right? We say shift to glass bottles, and most people have made that shift. Either it's glass or they're using, any of these copper cans to store their water. Similarly, just doing this can also help drastically, in my opinion.
That's
and of course,
brilliant point,
consuming vitamin E, omega can help, all in a cyclic fashion.
Yeah. But it's a brilliant point. A lot of people have these alkaline machines, water, like you said.
Yeah, and they're very expensive.
They're very expensive, but there's something that's kind of playing on my mind. Some of them are setting the pH to 9.5, 10, 11 and using the water on their face.
Yeah.
Aren't we upsetting the microbiome of the skin? Because isn't it regulating its own pH
So
with its own intelligence?
It's very interesting you bring up this point. So if you do a Google search on water, it shows up 7 types of water. And out of that, the beauty water, which is actually meant for cosmetic use, should have a pH between only 4 to
That's what I thought.
6.
Because
Nothing
our
more
skin's
than
protecting
that,
against microbes,
and
right?
you don't want it alkaline.
Yeah,
Our
they're putting
natural
alkaline.
mantle is acid.
Yes.
My microbiota is producing an acid mantle for my skin to prevent me from external pathogens. When I'm going to go alkalinize it, I'm killing that.
Yeah.
And I'm breaking that barrier. So of course the outside triggers will aggravate me. So everyone out there who's just using randomly very strong AHA waters or AHA toners, it could be ripping your skin of its essential moisture and disrupting your microbiome.
Yeah, and I agree. I just want to make a point because we have so many people using alkaline water on their face, thinking it's going to moisturize them more, but it's changing the pH and actually doing the opposite. No, that's a powerful point. Doctor, there's one more thing I want you to speak about before we leave today and come back for episode 3 soon, where I want to talk about psoriasis and eczema and the gut connection in detail and what we can do holistically as well as from a medical angle. What would your advice be to young girls, women out there who, they live such stressed out lives today because their skin's affected, and of course everyone wants to look good. So from a preventive space, in your practice, what would you advise the audience today to do to look after their skin, to prevent, anything happening? And if they have a problem, where should they start from?
Yeah. I think, more than talking to the audience, if I could talk to myself when I was 20-year-old, the one advice that I would give myself was the parties will happen and the lifestyle options that we're choosing will also happen. But if they're done in moderation, if I just choose to go to sleep on time and make sure that my circadian rhythm is kept intact and keep my drinking and smoking to as limited as possible and make those changes with diet, you will live a life which is much healthier for a much longer time. And one important thing is that never overlook any symptom, right? If you are not feeling the best version of yourself, and if you have been told that there's nothing wrong with you, don't stop there.
Yeah.
Dig deeper, find out what's really going on, whether it is acne or hair loss or something deeper like a sleep issue or a thyroid. Get to the root cause and treat it. Don't tell yourself, I'm young, it's okay, it'll get better with time. Because with time, it only deteriorates. It's not going to get better.
Beautiful. Dr. Sonali, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for your time again.
It's always a pleasure talking with you, Luke.
Thank you.
You make it so easy, honestly.
Thank you so much.
Stay tuned for more. We're going to continue our journey, learning, sharing, and evolving.